Good morning, everyone. As we come together on this final day of our conference, I'm honored to address you and share a glimpse into my journey that has taken me from combat boots and war to the forefront of psychedelic advocacy. My name is Juliana Mercer. For nearly 2 decades, I served in the United States Marine Corps, confronting the harsh realities of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Throughout my service, I witnessed firsthand the toll that war takes on the body, the spirit, and the mind. Upon leaving active duty, I found myself faced with a new battle, a battle against the epidemic of veteran suicide. Too many of my veteran brothers and sisters had succumbed to the invisible wounds of war, leaving behind a profound sense of loss, a void that echoed throughout our communities. Struggling with my own mental health challenges in the aftermath of service, I found myself feeling lost, without purpose. However, amidst the darkness, I found a glimmer of hope in the form of psychedelic therapy, thanks to the support of my friend Jesse Gould and his organization, Heroic Hearts Project. Through this unconventional path of healing, I discovered a new sense of purpose, a mission to advocate for safe access to these transformative treatments for my fellow veterans. Partnering with like-minded individuals and organizations, I embarked on a journey to explore the potential of psychedelic-assisted therapy as a means of healing for veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress and other mental health conditions. Today, as the Director of Veteran Advocacy and Public Policy at Healing Breakthrough, our mission is clear: to revolutionize mental health care for veterans and society at large through the integration of MDMA-assisted therapy in the VA. The bipartisan nature of our advocacy for veteran mental health is a testament to its national significance. In a time of political division, it stands as a beacon of unity, a shared commitment of honoring the sacrifices of those who served. Through bipartisan collaboration, we have made strides in advocating for novel treatments for PTSD, including psychedelic-assisted therapy. Yet, as we continue our advocacy efforts, it's crucial to recognize and address the unique struggles faced by women and BIPOC individuals within our communities. Women are disproportionately affected by traumatic events such as sexual assault and domestic violence, and are more likely to develop PTSD than men. About 8 of every 100 women, compared to 4 of every 100 men, will have PTSD at some point, and often encounter barriers in accessing mental health care. Similarly, BIPOC individuals face systemic racism and discrimination that compound their challenges in seeking quality care. As a brown woman veteran, I understand firsthand the importance of amplifying these voices in our advocacy efforts. We are not just statistics, we are the faces of resilience, strength, and courage in the fight against mental illness. Our diversity represents our society's rich tapestry, and our advocacy efforts must reflect this reality. As we stand on the cusp of a new era in psychedelic medicine, we must engage in open and honest dialogue about responsible access to these powerful substances. Veterans, with their unique experience and trusted voices, are poised to play a pivotal role in this conversation. Our bipartisan efforts have already begun to break down political barriers and garner support for psychedelic research and treatment. Today, as we gather to discuss the systems of responsible access to psychedelics, let us remember the millions of individuals who stand to benefit from these therapies. From the FDA's upcoming decision on MDMA to the groundbreaking regulatory systems in Oregon and Colorado, the landscape of psychedelic medicine is evolving rapidly. But as we navigate this new terrain, let us remain committed to ensuring equitable access and responsible use for all who can benefit. Thank you for your dedication, your advocacy, and your commitment to this vital cause. Together, we can pave the way for a brighter future in mental health. And I would like to welcome my co-host, Bia Labate, to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here Sunday morning. Much respect to the ones that are here Sunday morning. It's a pleasure to be here again with you. I have come to Horizons the first time in 2009 and have come so many years, like a sort of ritual peregrination to New York City. I think I'm in my 8th edition or so. It was sad and challenging to see Horizons postponed last year, which I think speaks a little bit to the challenges of the grassroots sides of this movement, to the disproportionate funding that exists for medicalization and investments and mainstreaming versus more grassroots nonprofit efforts, and I'm happy that we can be here together again this year. I am the executive director of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines, and I just want to give a big shout out to this one part of this movement that doesn't get as highlighted as often, which has to do with the non-medical side of the psychedelic renaissance, which I actually consider medicalization a smaller side and a kind of minority phenomenon within the psychedelic movement. I prefer the word movement and not industry, which I find very ugly word, and prefer to think of us as a movement. And so plant medicines, I'm an anthropologist that dedicated my whole career to studying ayahuasca and peyote and mushrooms and sacred plants and ceremony and indigenous issues and the interface of indigenous and non-indigenous issues and the global south and indigenous perspectives and ceremony and sitting together in community. And so those aspects are foundational to our movement, and they have been lost frequently in this expansion and in this eager for scaling and mainstreaming and profits and certain interests that are not representative of this entire movement. And I think we're in an inflection point of the psychedelic movement, which is we're about to mainstream, and it's not just about celebrating this scaling and this mainstreaming and investments and this, run for profits, but it's really about us thinking about what kind of psychedelic future we want to have, what kind of psychedelic movement do we want to create, what kind of culture do we want to preserve. And we just hosted a conference in Chacruna 2 weeks ago called Psychedelic Culture, and we picked the name as a kind of contrast to the idea of psychedelic science. The main point we're trying to make with this conference is that we really have to, we are just about to see this wave of more and more and more people coming in, and with FDA and potential legalization of MDMA and then psilocybin, and with all the decriminalization efforts happening throughout the country, we're just gonna have a whole new wave of people coming in and a whole new era of this movement. And it's really up to us that have been doing this work and that have felt the benefits and the sacred, blessings of being in ceremony and being touched and being humbled and being on our knees vomiting and thinking about, what have I done, and being sincere within yourself and your soul, between you and this invisible world, this non-human world, the world beyond, the world of our ancestors, the spiritual world, the world of animals and of other entities that are co-species with the same ontological value that we humans have, and not just as anthropocentric, aggressively taking over nature and reality. When we are in ceremony together and when we think about these plants and what they bring to us, and everything that we have benefited, how do we want to gear the psychedelic movement, and what are the values that we want this movement to have? How are we going to keep this movement in ethics and with integrity and honest, valuing first-hand experience, valuing the collective, putting the collective in front of the personal, putting service in front of profits, putting marginalized voices at the center. How are we using our power and our privilege and our chance to platform others to rewrite the story of this movement and to keep this movement faithful to its origins? Because we're not reinventing the wheel here. This movement didn't start on the 60s with, a few scientists on a lab. This comes from other places, other times. It has roots in indigenous people. The psychedelic-assisted therapy learned a lot from indigenous communities, and from the underground. There is this big continuity between the underground, who's heirs of shamanism, of indigenous shamanism. So there's this whole other way of understanding this movement that frequently gets lost in this rush for medicalization, rush for profits, rush for scaling, rush for companies, rush for new investors. And I think we are here to remember that we need to foster this movement, creating this culture that honors these traditions, that honors the lands and the people where these plants come from, and that are going to help keep this movement going in the right direction. And that passes through starting with your personal experiences, with having the humility to be in ceremony and to learn directly from the plants. This is not something you can learn just in books. And if you want to heal others, you should also look at your personal healing and have your own trajectory with plant medicines and examine, your areas of growth. And I see this movement progressing and becoming bigger and bigger. And I think it's up to us. I'm here, an anthropologist that like the more hippie kind of things. I'm just dropping my 2 cents to remind us about plant medicines, about Latin America, about community, about minorities, about people of color, about indigenous people, about the collective. And it's not all about medicalization and money and people sitting somewhere making decisions for others without having any personal experience and guiding the ways that we're moving and trying to bring this to a lot of people. Because if we're not really intentional, we're going to reproduce a lot of the paradoxes of systemic capitalism, legacies of institutional racism, of colonization, and all the paradoxes that oppress us all, heteronormativity and patriarchy, and all kinds of phobias. I respect medicalization. I value science, but there's much more to all of this movement. And that minor recent phenomenon called the medicalization of psychedelics needs to be put into perspective and remember the wider lenses of where we come from, honoring the original stewards of these plants and their teachings and their, other ways of understanding reality, which start by not putting human beings as superior to other species and with capacity of subjugating nature for our own pleasure. And so that's my 2 cents. Thank you so much, and let's have a great day together.
Thank you, Bia. I'd like to welcome to the stage Senator Natalia Fernandez. She's a New York State Senator who's leading the charge on important psychedelic legislation. Senator.
Thank you. Thank you so much and good morning. It really is a pleasure to be here today to talk about what we know we're talking about. I'm State Senator Natalia Fernandez. I represent District 34, which encompasses the East Bronx and Southern Westchester. I've been in the Senate since 2023, first ran in 22, but I've been in the State Assembly before that for 2 terms, and really have been a public servant, employee in government for the last 12 years. So I've seen a lot happen. I've seen how things can happen, and I've seen the time that it takes a lot of things to happen. And when it comes to government politics, aside from policy, it's never an easy challenge, and that's what I want to talk about today, like how I think we can make this happen, how we can bring New York to that next step in allowing psychedelics in our medical field. So I have a bill, I believe the number is S7832A. And what it is a pilot program to allow the medicinal monitored use of psilocybin. And how did I get this bill? Am I somebody who has, used it before? No. Do I know of it? Of course. But it was really my colleague, my assembly colleague, and my partner in this fight. His name is Assemblymember Pat Burke. He represents up in Buffalo. So we served together in the State Assembly, and upon me now campaigning and getting ready to enter the Senate, he was like, I have a bill for you, and I think you'd be a good person for it. And why? Because I think I'm great. I think I can, talk to my colleagues and build that understanding. And that's really a challenge for every legislator, not only to build understanding to your colleagues and, to the powers that be, the governor and leadership, but also to your community. Because the things that you support, it can keep you in office, it could kick you out of office. So I do see that always being, the fear and the lack of political will and policy for people in government to actually introduce the topic, try to break the stigma, try to educate, and ultimately succeeding in getting that bill signed. So my bill, yes, is a pilot program for the medicinal monitored use, but for veterans. And it was mentioned today, thank you to our co-host, amazing story, and another great story that I've learned and carry with me in all my discussions, because in politics, like the safe medium, if this, could be understood that way, is our veterans and our first responders, there's some things that you can always imagine, Republicans care about this, Democrats care about that. And our veterans, we all care about, we're all appreciative of them. So that is, I think, the biggest segue and bridge to bringing psilocybin and psychedelics into the general conversation. So the bill would be a pilot program to veterans and first responders, because we know they're suffering from PTSD, we know they're suffering from depression, suicidal ideations, and so much more. But in the State Senate, I also chair the Committee of Alcoholism and Substance Use Disorder. And in those conversations, which I've had many, because I want to learn as much as possible, I want to know as much as possible, I want to be ready for any conversation with my colleagues or my community to break the stigma. And that really is, I think, the biggest wall that we're continuing to hit, that people just don't want to believe that this can work. People want to be fearful. People want to keep the danger away. And as we've seen with the war on drugs, and when psilocybin was first scheduled, there has been a fear that's been put on there that still affects our communities. And upon me getting this position, having the many conversation, what works, what doesn't work, what can we make better in our providers for the services that they give, how can we allow them to have more services? Because one thing that every single location, practitioner, provider has told me is we have to meet people where they are and address each person individually for their concern, their need, their issue, everything. So with psilocybin, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little hesitant because here I am coming to the Senate. I have a much bigger district. Demographics are much different than, my assembly district. And if you could paint it in any way, I do have a pretty purplish district. But again, what we've found is that we care about people who are hurting, and we have to care. And the further that we talk and educate about it, people do come around. So for this effort, I think we've made the most strides that we've ever had, because upon me getting this bill and introducing it in the Senate, I learned that there was a proposal that existed to decriminalize psilocybin. Mine was to create this pilot program. I also have another bill to have not just the pilot for veterans, but also the greater community. But looking at how things have progressed in our state, how we got to legalizing marijuana, we started with the medicinal legalization. Then a couple years later, we finally got to a place that we could decriminalize it. A few years later, we've legalized recreational use. So that procedure is a model that I'm trying to mimic in a way, because I know this is a conversation that is taking time, and it will take some time to finally get to the finish line. On average, a new bill that can get introduced maybe exists for like 10 years. So it's, I think we're still in the beginning of the fight. I've only had this bill for 2 years, but the conversation has been alive for a while. And I think that, and for what I've seen amongst my colleagues and leadership, is the want to help those that have helped us. And that is going to be the door to getting the conversation about psilocybin, the usage of it, in a place where we're not going to be fearful. And there's always challenges involved. I know everyone has seen and heard of the illegal cannabis shops after we've legalized recreational use. And unfortunately, some of these illegal shops have had mushrooms and psilocybin there. And it's all over the news, it's all over the media, it's all over in your local community board meetings. Oh my God, this evil drug is out there too, now the mushrooms. And so the education is just constant. But what is so much more inspiring that I've seen is the stories of real transformation, the stories of real, groundbreaking joy and really peace that I've seen people finally being able to find in themselves. And, relating to the pain, relating to the experiences is the only way that we can all get to the understanding and be okay with this opportunity that we should make available. So the bill right now, it has not moved through any committee, and that too is a hurdle, because with the process of bills, if we remember Schoolhouse Rock and how the little bill gets to, the floor, this bill is still in its committee in both houses. And the way we've seen New York function right now, like finally we have the majority in the state Senate, first time in probably, my goodness, I think of the 245 years, there's only been about 10 years that there have been Democratic leadership in the state Senate. And in the last 5 years with Democratic leadership, we've seen a lot of movement happen, because finally the House that held the door closed is open, and I'm grateful to be a part of a conference that is open and willing to make these changes for the state. So working on getting the support of co-sponsorships and bringing that will to my colleagues to be on the bill. Show yourself as a supporter of wanting to help people get better. And it really is amazing when you look at the success stories. I've seen as many documentaries as I can. I've had the conversations. I've been to the mushroom farms. To see that, there is something out there that can do the magic that we hope for, to reverse alcoholism, to reverse or to stop addiction, to stop, again, suicidal tendencies. It really is magical, if that's, the word that we can use. That's the word that I use, because it's just amazing to me that something that forever has been taboo, pushed aside, is actually the key to helping people in a way that things like opioids that we know is killing people has never been able to succeed. So that's really the challenge that I face, and the journey that I'm enjoying, kind of like going against the grain of those that want to be fearful, that want to keep instilling this fear and keeping those doors closed about what it means and what is a good tool to help people heal. So I anticipate, more co-sponsors. We've had many events in Albany so far, and that is part of the process of building, because you could introduce a bill and then do nothing. And if you do nothing, nothing's going to happen. But we've had roundtables, we've had film screenings, we've had the advocates make their meetings with each individual legislator to, again, build that understanding. And even if the legislator may not get on the bill, it's good to get the word that if the bill comes to the floor, I'll still vote for it. So I do think we might need another term, and hopefully, luckily, I will be back here next term to continue this fight. But I do think that we're in a place that we've never been before, with understanding, openness to learn, to not stop progress. And by that, I mean scheduling, making these medicines a dangerously scheduled drug. That's something that, unfortunately, our governor had in a proposal at one point this year. We pass the state budget every year. March is the negotiation month, and come April, that's when we finally pass it. We're not supposed to have policy in the budget, and I have another bill for that to keep policy out of the budget, but it always does get its way in. And when it came to this area of substance use disorder, which is something I changed, because when I came in, it was alcoholism and substance abuse, and changing the title, changing the name, is an example of how we can continue to break the stigma, change the stigma. People are not trying to hurt themselves or abusing themselves because they decide to use a substance. And if they are hurting themselves, then that's a disorder that must be treated as such. And creating that mindset in and of itself is a challenge, but I'm grateful that we're seeing new leaders in the state legislature, young like me, that are open to this, that are not afraid to have the conversations, and that are pushing leadership to look at it, learn, and be ready to make this happen. Because as far as we see and we know, there's too many people hurting, suffering, and unfortunately dying because something like this, that's natural, that comes from the earth, that's not man-made in a lab, can be a real tool to saving our lives. And above all, I love to know our history. I love to celebrate our indigenous roots. I'm Cuban and Colombian, and that part of it is just as important too. Knowing what was used once before we had our laboratories. What can we do to bring them back? How can we? Okay, yeah, thank you. And yeah, just really bringing it into the conversation as much as possible. So I see my seconds are out, but thank you so much for allowing me to come here and to share this process. If you know who your state legislators are in the Assembly and the Senate, please ask them to get on this bill, to come to conferences like this, make meetings with advocates in their offices, because it is that face-to-face conversation that really does move a member to be okay, to get on the bill, to then become a supporter of the bill, and when it gets to that point, to vote on it. And that's what we need. We need to continue to build the momentum. So you can go to, I guess, Google who's my state senator or your assembly member, but we need both supports in both houses so we can show the governor, whichever governor it is, that this is something New York State is ready for. So thank you so much.